It's spinning. Hey, and we are live. What's happening, wrestling fans? Updates are not installed. Hold on just a second, everybody. Okay, there we go. What's happening, wrestling fans?
What are you doing?
So, we rarely broadcast together, so...
Together.
Kevin, how's it going, brother?
Live.
Live. We
Together
are live.
From the Bluegrass State, because as you know, you normally join us on Sundays. We weren't around on Sunday because I only recently found out that West Virginia does not have the internet.
Yeah, apparently we don't.
I had no idea. I don't understand, Doug, how you've managed to do the show for the last year plus.
Off a Wi-Fi hotspot, brother. But, even that, all good things must come to an end. So Kevin made me come to his house tonight to make sure that he wouldn't have to do another show alone. And we are getting
done enough of those.
And I'm getting a look behind the curtain on his side, and he is getting a look behind the curtain on my side. And I'm going to, spoiler alert, one of us is super prepared and one of us is never prepared. I'll let you guys figure out which one is which of that.
Leave it in the comments. I've got Doug down here in the basement, what looks like a dark dungeon to talk about tonight. Doug, our main event topic is rather a dark subject, and that is the curious case of Keith Lee.
Oh, Keith Lee.
How is the man still, one, not in the main event? And if not in the main event, how is he still employed when so many others? So, I mean,
this exactly, especially
it's somewhere in between.
Especially with, well, let's hope he doesn't feud with Randy Orton anytime soon, or he will be unemployed. But we'll save that for the news. What's going on, Kevin?
Opening bell time, Doug.
Oh, opening bell. Hold on. I was totally unprepared. Opening bell. Can I do it? Yep. Oh, boom. Opening bell.
Opening bell. We got a lot of news, folks, and again, thank you for your patience and the fact that we didn't have a show on Sunday. This past Sunday, we are having a show this upcoming Sunday, so I'm going to divide the news into some of the bigger headlines tonight, and then we're going to discuss some other things in the news come Sunday. Who would have thought that in a week where you have some pretty significant and major releases, I had that intended to be the top news story. But breaking news, folks, in case you haven't heard, SummerSlam is in jeopardy. And I know, as we've talked before, Doug, about how excited, it seems like only a few shows ago we were talking about how wonderful it was to have live wrestling back that you can buy your ticket for, go and see in person. And now it looks like we may not actually be done with the Thunderdome era after all. I know we have been very cautious to the folks at home, saying that please check before you go, make sure we're not out of the woods. Japan's had a few hiccups and rollbacks, and with the raging Delta virus, it looks like that is also the case here in America. Internally, WWE is anticipating a strong possibility that they may have to move SummerSlam either to a Thunderdome type concept or back to the Performance Center. Folks, they were getting ready to have this event and still scheduled to have this event in a football stadium.
Still scheduled for this.
40,000 people in a football stadium in Arizona. And internally, though, WWE is telling folks that they hope to get SummerSlam in, but this tour that they're currently on, they're thinking 3-4 weeks at the most before the government or local municipalities start shutting things down. We're not talking about a everyone indoors lockdown situation again, but more a probably restrictions going back up for mass gatherings, which of course are what large wrestling events are. And obviously WWE is not the only one affected by this. AEW is supposedly in the same boat as far as internally they're making contingency plans, fully expecting that this is where we're going.
They have a big show coming up in Chicago.
Yes, they do. Actually, there's so many big shows on the calendar that are currently in jeopardy. It's just right now probably going to be a matter, Doug, of how many of them do we get in before the plug is pulled. And they're probably, that's what they're trying to do, hope for the best that they can get in as many as they can before the plug is pulled. So.
Absolutely. But I'd rather everyone err on the side of caution than keep folks safe.
Absolutely.
I mean, I hate to go back to the Thunderdome era, especially being reminded how hot wrestling can be with fans in attendance.
How good it's been.
Absolutely. But, we do what we got to do.
And we will update this story on Sunday because even though that's only a few days away when we're doing our next show, it wouldn't surprise me a bit if we know a lot more about the circumstances then. So stay tuned for that. And what would have been the headline for tonight had it not been for the fact that we may be going back and canceling live events. But it seems like we're always talking about releases. We're going to lead off this next segment with a series of releases, the biggest of which and probably the most surprising of which is that of Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt was released last week. A 12-year employee of WWE, first came on as Husky Harris, but after that initial bumpy start, I mean, Bray Wyatt was not only a major character. When you think about, we just talked about going back to the Thunderdome in the pandemic era. I mean, so much of that era was covered by cinematic wrestling.
Absolutely.
And because of the kind of character that he is, the supernatural kind of character.
He was. And Alexa Bliss is now, I guess. I
mean, he main evented the pandemic WrestleMania with John Cena, of all people, and had one of the more entertaining and innovative type cinematic matches of that whole cinematic era. And now he's unemployed. I mean, that's not that long ago to go from carrying a company's main events month after month to unemployment line.
Unemployment, yeah. I mean, Wyndham Rotunda is clearly a incredibly creative and incredibly talented individual, and wherever he lands, it's definitely going to be on his feet. And interesting, I didn't realize this until earlier this week, Kevin. He was Cody Rhodes' rookie on NXT.
Oh, that is right.
Yeah,
I had forgotten all about that.
Don't know if that's some foreshadowing going on, but.
And also talk about things we didn't know. Bray Wyatt in real life is married to JoJo. And those fans who might remember JoJo from her time at NXT, Total Divas, apparently she was also released. But there we go. I had no idea she was employed. Apparently this happened 6 months or so ago quietly. But she was apparently still employed by WWE, even though she hasn't appeared on television in years. So it's interesting with Bray Wyatt, Doug, because what you essentially have is, as you said, a very creative individual. He created this character. The character has been transformed from him into another performer in Alexa Bliss, and then they let him go after taking his intellectual property and giving the gimmick essentially
they totally gave to Alexa.
So that's sort of a kick while you're down, isn't it?
Right. And there's circling back around to our topic, Keith Lee, there's been a lot of questionable information floating around about why Keith Lee was off the air. Same thing about Bray Wyatt. Was it about the character? Was it about the way he was being booked? Was it medical? What was it? And there's all that floating around too. So it's
Mick Foley in his appreciation of Bray Wyatt made a post and made some sort of cryptic comments about I hope you get well, or something about I know you were struggling, and I don't know if that means creatively, physically. It only really asked more questions than it answered, but hopefully everything is okay with Bray. And like you said, I'm sure he'll land on his feet. And I know we say this a lot, but it is so true. I know we're funneling tons and tons of people to AEW, but they cannot hire everyone. It's just not possible for them to hire everyone in the broad WWE ecosystem once they get let go. But Bray Wyatt is such a big name.
Absolutely.
I can't imagine that AEW wouldn't have some level of interest, even if they don't really have room for him, because they have kind of an overcrowded roster issue of their own really starting to form.
And especially with a lot, a lot of talents that could be potentially coming in. What we got there? Where'd it go? I can't see it.
So this is where
there we go.
Doug's normally running the comments from the other side.
I'm just overwhelmed by all your notes over there. That's a lot
You're
of
not
words.
supposed to see these. Until tonight, Doug thought I was actually looking at him. Now I'm trying to look at notes and then look at you guys.
I mean, I show up and have maybe a couple of notes on my phone. Kevin's got War and Peace over here. But anyway, we got comments. Oh, I can't read that now. Old man eyes. Okay, there we go. You know what? I had heard this too about him having a hard time after the death of Brody Lee. It did seem to hit him hard. That's something I definitely have heard. I really wonder how much of that is true. I mean, clearly they were really, really tight. And of course, cue the speculation train. There's a perfect way to enter him into AEW as handing him the reins to the Dark Order. But
For sure.
So
Yeah, that's like
that just writes itself, especially
Yeah.
with what's going on with the Dark Order and Hangman right now. But getting ahead of us there. That's just one story.
That is just
of
one
news.
release. Ric Flair, the legendary greatest of all time, asked for and was granted his release. In postings on his social media, he was very effusive in his thanks to WWE for making him what he is today, that there wasn't any hard feelings, that they just had a difference of opinion on his creative direction in the future for him. That is what he said publicly, Doug.
Yes.
But behind the scenes, there are many reports that this apparently has been in the works for a long time, that he'd been dissatisfied for a long time. And there are some conflicting reports that he, in fact, made an ultimatum to Vince McMahon and texted him with an ultimatum that Vince pretty much said no to, and that was the end of that. Another report mentions that the text actually was not about himself, but rather about his daughter and complaints about the way she has been booked. Hard to say if either of those stories are true, but needless to say, even in his public comments, as nice as they were, they obviously were not in agreement and not in lockstep, and he was granted the release he was asked for. I don't know where a 60-plus-year-old Ric Flair lands.
I don't know either. I know there were comments about Ric Flair wanting to pursue other opportunities outside of wrestling, and I think wine and comic books were mentioned, which sounds good to me. But yeah, I think it's a little telling that the traditional best of luck in your future endeavors, Ric Flair wasn't exactly future endeavored. There was no best of luck in your future endeavors with his release.
Perhaps they don't wish him the best, and,
or they don't want his future endeavors going to, I don't know, Jacksonville. I don't know.
Well, he's got Car Shield. He could drive to Jacksonville. He can be completely fine if something were to happen. In other release news, Kanyon Seaman, who is the senior VP for talent development, has also been released from his WWE contract. I know that Kanyon is sort of a behind-the-scenes character for most of his tenure with WWE, but as they got more into the social media era and then into the reality show era, he began to be seen more on TV. So a lot of folks do know who he is. He also came under pretty negative light with the recent scandal with all the other talent releases. As someone who was involved with talent relations, when you have folks being released and having their junk sent to them via mail in a trash bag. So it could be related to that. It could be completely unrelated to that. Whatever the reason, he is also looking for more work.
So with that, WWE got rid of the guy who's basically in charge of contracts, right?
Correct.
So
yeah.
I'm not sure if Seaman was released before. I just heard what I said. Before or after Malachi Black was released, and somebody realized, oh, wait a minute, we screwed up that contract.
Wasn't looking at the contract.
He was definitely released before they realized that Adam Cole's contract is up this month instead of the end of the year, like everyone seemed to think. So Adam Cole could be the most current hottest free agent real soon.
And some of that may be the reason for Kanyon's dismissal. But publicly it was just a corporate break. But who knows what the real story on that one is. And other comings and goings that don't actually involve WWE, but Kiera Hogan, who is one of the hottest free agents in wrestling now, as far as the female division goes, probably the hottest female talent free agent who's not named Blanchard. She recently gave her Impact to Impact Wrestling that she was not going to renew, and instead choosing to explore her other options. Hint, that means only two real places you
Right.
go up from Impact, and that's going to be either AEW or WWE, probably NXT. Either way, Kiera Hogan, who's a multiple-time women's tag champ there in Impact, would be a great addition. Super talented, uber charismatic, and so best of luck to her and landing in one of the bigger promotions. Speaking of Impact, though, they've had a huge get as far as coming and going goes. They have for the last several weeks. If you're sleeping on Impact programming, Impact does not get enough credit for how they've sort of carried the water in this whole breaking down of the forbidden door, as it were. Tony Khan gets credit, but honestly, AEW has been maybe quick to recognize the NWA or New Japan more than they have been able to recognize Impact on their own programming. But Impact has got Switchblade. Switchblade has been on their programming, and he is the current leader in New Japan of the Bullet Club. One of the world's best heels, has yet to really have wide exposure in America. And so to do so on Impact Television is, to me, a huge get for Impact.
Absolutely.
Honestly, it'd be a huge get for AEW or WWE, and here, Switchblade is on Impact. That's pretty awesome for them. So definitely tune in if you haven't.
Absolutely.
Injury news. Natalya was injured on last week's Raw. If you didn't see it, Doudrop landed on her ankle, and the ankle required surgery. Hope is, though, that Natty is going to be able to return in time to not have to worry about doing anything sort of relinquishing. At this time, they're not making a decision on whether or not they'll need to relinquish the women's tag team belts that she co-holds with Tamina. So get well soon, Natty, and hopefully it doesn't interfere with any of the plans. Poor Natty got hurt before WrestleMania, and now is getting hurt right before SummerSlam. So her luck's not been great when it comes to the big paydays. And then finally, folks, we're going to leave you on the news side of things with some sad news. We had a couple of notable passings in the world of professional wrestling. But first, our condolences to the family, friends, and fans of Jody Hamilton. Hamilton was 82, had a 30-plus year career. All old-time wrestling fans are going to remember this. In the ring, he was the masked assassin. I mean, one of the first wrestlers I can remember under the mask. Probably Mr. Wrestling #2, Super Destroyer, and then maybe the Masked Assassins. He started wrestling in the 50s and then wrestled all the way up until a back injury took him out in the 80s. And then even after that, he spent many years behind the scenes in NWA and WCW, sort of mentoring Tony Schiavone, and JR was talking about him on this past week's Dynamite. So again, Masked Assassin passed away at the age of 82, and very sad news. And honestly, even sadder, and I only say sadder, death is sad, but 82 is a good life. 62 is too young. Yeah. I mean, I think we all can admit 62 is too young. If you've not heard, apparently last night, the legendary, beautiful Bobby Eaton passed away at the age of 62. Eaton was actually, he debuted in 1976. I had no idea it was that early. He was 17 years old when he debuted in the NWA. His career really took off in Mid-South Wrestling when he was paired up at the time with Dennis Condrey. They gave him a manager named Jim Cornette that they gave a tennis racket to. The Midnight Express was born. They move on into Georgia, the Mid-Atlantic region, then NWA/WCW. One of the greatest tag team feuds of all time. I'd say maybe the best, and certainly of my youth. I mean,
absolutely.
The Rock and Roll Express versus the Midnight Express. It got no better than that when it came to tag team wrestling. Doug, what are some of your memories of Bobby?
Goodness gracious. I know I say this a lot, but there are wrestlers, and I hate to say this, I know we're talking about Bobby, but Jim Cornette always comes to mind first of all when we're talking about Midnight Express, Rock and Roll Express, any of the wrestlers involved there. Cornette really sticks out in my mind more than the actual performers there. I hate to say that, especially since we're talking about one of these performers who just recently passed, but goodness,
for his time, as far as performers goes, Bobby was never a body guy. He wasn't a muscular guy, but he was a technician. He was solid in the ring, and for the era, also was a bit of a high flyer. Dennis Condrey would work the guys on the ground, and then Bobby would come off with that beautiful elbow drop from the top rope. And at the time, I just, you didn't see a whole lot of wrestlers coming off the top, and Bobby was one of the best at it. And they were great at getting heel heat. Obviously, Jim Cornette had a ton to do with that, but it got no better. And if you want to know how talented Bobby was, it's kind of like changing band members. Like, you change a band member and normally it's never the same. Or Bobby was the anchor because Dennis Condrey got switched out. Stan Lane comes in and the Midnight Express kept rolling like nothing. And that's because of Jim Cornette on the mic and Bobby and the work he did in the ring. So I was very sad to hear that, because that's anyone who is our age, that was one of the teams you grew up on. That was one of the guys on your TV at 6:05 every Saturday night for years. All told, a 40-year in-ring career, had a mind for the business, helped afterwards, teaching others. I know he'd been in pretty poor health the last few years. Obviously, that had to be the case for him to pass away at only 62 years old. But sad news. And obviously, we do our condolences to the other members of the Midnight Express, both Dennis and Stan, who are still living, and Jim Cornette, because I know that they're probably like brothers, and how close you have to be when you travel the roads that long together. But that's it for the opening bell, because we're going to be back on Sunday, and join us on Sunday for the news segment, because we're going to talk a little bit on Sunday, saving some of the news items, including rumors as to some of the hottest gossip as to who is going where, who may be making their return, and where they are making those returns. Nothing official yet, but maybe we'll know a little more about Sunday. We'll get into that and some other things on Sunday night's show. But with that, Doug, I think we're ready for
look at that.
The main event.
I'm out of my element, but I can still press buttons and hope for the best. Story of my life. Main event.
That's all we can do. Main event time.
Let's do it.
We're here to discuss the curious case of Keith Lee, because really, even though there's some similarities to what we've seen across the board in WWE the last year, there's definitely some peculiarities about Keith Lee's case that makes it even more fascinating, really, to discuss. And for those of you who maybe are only familiar with Keith Lee because of you watch Raw or SmackDown, and you saw him for a little bit and then he disappeared, and you're thinking, well, what's the big deal about Keith Lee? You really need to look before he hit the main roster to know just exactly why it's such a big deal. Keith Lee tore through the Indies, Ring of Honor, European wrestling scene. He signed with WWE 3 years ago in NXT, and yes, he posted here recently that it was 3 years since he signed his contract, and much like he did with the Indies, he shot to the top of NXT really quick. He was the first man in NXT to hold both the North American and the NXT championships simultaneously. And back when WWE was bringing NXT talent and mingling them in with Raw and SmackDown, he started to, be featured in these periodic appearances, and the crowd knew who he was. The mainstream crowd knew who he was. He had that special moment at Survivor Series as well as Royal Rumble prior to him being on the main roster, where he's rubbing shoulders with Roman Reigns and Brock Lesnar, big man versus big man, and the crowd was going nuts for Keith Lee. And that gave the WWE officials all they needed to know about, we got some money here. This guy's going to be good when we bring him up. They bring him up. First week, he's pinning a former world champion, future Hall of Famer, and Randy Orton on Monday Night Raw in a surprise unadvertised appearance. From that, gets booked into the main event of the pay-per-view that weekend. Doug, at the time, I fooled myself, maybe you did too, and thinking, the sky's the limit. He's already starting at the top. Like, he's going to be a fixture.
So here's something I was thought about in hindsight. I think the first clue that the Keith Lee situation may not work out the way we thought it did. Keith Lee's debut, he had like that singlet thing that, he's got the shirt and everything on, whereas every other time I've seen him perform, he's in shorts, right? He doesn't have a shirt on. He's in and Keith Lee is a big dude. I mean, that's just part of that magic that is Keith Lee. big dudes cannot move or should not move, just like Samoa Joe
Should not move.
should not move like that.
Yeah.
But he does. I mean, super charismatic. I mean, we've seen him live. My God, he's amazing. But the first chink in the armor, the first little thing that I was like, oh no, this might be bad.
Why did
somebody make him put a shirt on? What he's not cut like Brock Lesnar at all. He's no Roman Reigns. He's not built like that. But
they also changed the song too.
Well,
they shouldn't have changed the song.
They should not have changed the song. But don't put a shirt on him. Don't change the song. What are you doing?
The song is one thing. The shirt gave us pretty good indication. I think that's actually a great thing. Wasn't in my notes that you point out is that early on someone had a problem with Keith Lee's look, which, this is the sport of Brock Lesnar. Yes. It's also the sport of Samoa Joe and King Kong Bundy and Big John Studd and Dick Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes.
And Mabel.
These folks are all body types. So, that era of late 90s where you all had to be jacked is way past. So putting a shirt on a big man because he's not, got a Arnold Schwarzenegger competition type physique is already outdated thinking, which probably leads you into thinking who it is that maybe had that dictate, right?
I mean, yeah, because a lot of times we hear about that audience of one up in Stanford, but I mean, I was legit super excited with him coming in like that.
Yeah, like gangbusters.
I mean, that was hot. It was great, but that was the first time I thought this is good or maybe this is bad because I mean, let's face it, if we look at the history of NXT call-ups. Yeah. Things don't necessarily go as great as they could or as we think they could. I mean, and maybe that's us putting too much of a belief in a character that's been established in one thing. And are we a niche audience? We are NXT fans, but we're also wrestling fans. So are we expecting the NXT crowd to translate to the main roster crowd?
I think that Triple H has described it before. And maybe he's going to regret the way he's described it, but he would say that NXT is punk rock, underground. It's hip. It's if you're in the know, you're in the know. Whereas WWE is pop music, where you have to appeal to a broader audience, and sometimes those punk rock acts maybe don't appeal as much to the pop audience, or someone who's trying to appeal to the pop audience thinks we need to change this punk rock act when maybe you don't. Maybe you got Green Day on your hands and they're going to be just fine on the pop world after all.
You don't need that third ballad on the album when you got multiple garage rockers there already and maybe I mean the audience knew him. They knew him. They were chanting. They were ready for Keith Lee.
That's where it doesn't make sense because you had the focus group test of let's put him in front of 50,000 people instead of in front of 2,000 or 3,000 people in an NXT audience. And they went nuts for him, knew who he was and supported him. So that makes it even more curious that his fall began so rapidly because it really did look at first like, okay, they brought the gimmick over, shirt notwithstanding. I mean, it's not like he showed up with a new name or a new look. I mean, it's like, okay, they're believing in the character they built in NXT and they put him right in the main event. And it quickly went downhill from there. He was used less and less until it got to the point that he disappeared almost completely. And he had a feud that was starting to bubble up with Riddle, dropped completely. And then word came out, it wasn't even a rumor, that Vince McMahon himself was dissatisfied with the work rate of a lot of the big men on the roster. Otis was one I recall. Omos was another. I don't remember a few of the others, but the most surprising
and I think we touched on this in a show
at the time.
Yeah.
That the only one that really, I mean, he wasn't wrong. Vince wasn't wrong about most of those guys. Otis was still very green. He's gotten better. Omos, still very green, but learning, improving. Keith Lee was never of a piece with those same big men. He never had a problem with work rate. So while he got grouped into that, has to be an appearance thing, right?
It has to be, because I thought about this, and I probably, if we go back and rewatch the tapes, I probably had a lengthy rant about this. But in hindsight, I've got to say I don't think there's anything wrong with sending your guys back to NXT, not as your work's not what it could be. Yeah, I'm thinking the guys who want to be at the top, you're always going to think their work's not what it could be and are always going to want to improve. So you send them back to where I think you have the hungriest and honestly the best talent and the best utilized talent in the company. There really shouldn't be a problem with that as, hey, go get even better. But the implication was you're not good enough.
You're being demoted.
Yes,
is what the
implication was.
Or when it's done wholesale with our big men can't work.
Yes.
You suddenly got grouped in with Omos and Otis, and you're a veteran of the business for 10 years or however long Keith Lee's been at it. He's not a rookie like the others are, and he's not unpolished like the others are.
All.
So, yeah, it was unfair to group him in with those other individuals as if they were the same, because that was not apples to apples.
Now, and again, Keith Lee is one of those total package wrestlers. He could work. He could talk, and so personable. I mean, we saw him at an NXT show in Columbus, and Kevin snaps a picture. It's the picture that we're using for our thumbnail for this. I'm being a goof, like in behind, like I'm photobombing it. Keith Lee looks at me like, who the hell is this guy behind you? Or Kevin's taking a picture, and then I think it clicks in him, and he's like, all right, I see what's going on here, and he's cool about it, I mean, he was just such a cool dude.
And that night he gave everybody that same moment. He stayed until every person who was there that wanted to meet him got greeted. And so it was, it is kind of that punk rock thing. The NXT crowd, I remember connecting with, meeting Johnny Gargano and Tommaso Ciampa after a show one time. They could not have been nicer. I remember after an NXT show one time, Billie Kay out the bus taking pictures of us waiting on them because she was so excited to see fans.
Cool.
Just seeing them at that level is like seeing a band in a club before they get big.
Right.
So when they make it to the main roster, it's like our boys have graduated to the the main stage at Bonnaroo, or they're playing Saturday Night Live, or they now everyone's going to know who they are, and you feel invested in them. I know you probably felt this way too. I was happy for Keith Lee.
Absolutely, man.
What a good dude who's great and works hard, and he deserves this.
Yes.
And then
he was gone.
And he was gone.
He was just gone
because Otis came back.
Yeah.
Omos came back. But this is where it gets curious. For 8-9 months, it was nothing. Off TV completely. Was he injured? No. There were rumors that maybe he was, and then time came, went by, and then it became known that he wasn't, that they didn't have anything for him. So they're paying him to sit at home. But this is where I think it's very strange, because in the 9 and a half months that Keith Lee sat home doing nothing, WWE released 20-some talents, many of whom, quite honestly, were more popular, more famous, more utilized than Keith Lee. A lot of those talents were underutilized talents that they truly had nothing for whatever reason. Some of that you can blame on creative or just too much talent, too little time. But Keith Lee, somewhere in the middle, is someone who they have, a creative idea for, obviously, through NXT and to get him on the main roster. Yet he's sent home and not released. Why do you think that you have Braun Strowman and bigger names, obviously money? I mean, unless they have him on just a super friendly, low dollar deal, if Vince is that displeased with him that you just send him home, why not just let him go?
Right. Yeah. I don't get it, man. I just don't. I don't know, because, like you say, you got Braun Strowman. Braun Strowman, big money contract. I get,
$1 million or whatever. There, you say.
WWE trying to clean things up, clean up the books. Okay, I don't know what Keith Lee's contract is, but apparently it's enough for him to sit at home. And there were a couple of mystery tweets that he did send out, right? A
Yes.
couple of things like, hey, someday I'll be able to tell this tale, and then hints that, all will be revealed. But
Yes.
all to this day, unless I've missed something.
And that did lead to some to believe, like, is he okay?
Exactly.
And David Poole, I see you mentioned COVID. I believe that his wife, Mia Yim, had COVID, so therefore he was on COVID protocols to
quarantine.
Quarantine. But they both recovered fairly quickly, and the 10-month absence it certainly didn't explain, and it doesn't explain why other folks from Alistair. I mean, if you want to look at parallels, no, Keith Lee was not a Braun Strowman, but nor was he a Chelsea Green, someone who people don't quite know yet, or never got traction in NXT. Much less the main roster. She barely made an NXT appearance before she got called up to SmackDown, got hurt.
Yes, poor girl.
Bad luck.
Yeah.
With Impact now.
Yeah, doing much better.
Doing much better.
Good for you, Chelsea.
But Keith Lee, probably, I would say, popularity-wise, would probably be...
I'm thinking Riddle-ish.
Yeah.
I think that's fair.
Yeah, or to the release talent, Alistair Black.
Absolutely.
As far as how the fans look at him.
Yeah.
And look at how Alistair Black is being treated by the fans on AEW.
Exactly.
He's already being treated like a main event star that was misused in WWE. So,
which is exactly what he was.
And exactly what Keith Lee is.
Yeah.
So if you're willing to let an Alistair Black go, and an Andrade would be another that I would think would be at that level of popular with the fans, known for their work rate, already seasoned, not rookies, but not over their heel yet either. Like, why would you let Andrade and Alistair Black go to the competition, but why you hold on to Keith Lee unless you actually have something for him? Which leads us to the fact that we had planned to do this show before Keith Lee. We were going to look for Keith Lee, and then Doug found him.
Turns out he was under a tree at my house.
He has no internet, so he had nothing else to do. And there was Keith Lee. But no, Keith Lee, since we decided to do the show, made his return to Raw. And if you want to look at the glass half full, you could say, yeah, they brought him back in a match against the world champion.
How'd that work out?
Well, exactly. Glass half full, you put him in a ring with someone important. It doesn't matter who wins or loses, right? But except when you've been off TV for 10 months, it kind of does. So without an announcement, without any hype, you just throw him back out there, big return, fans love it, and then he loses rather easily to Bobby Lashley. So, okay, that's an odd first choice. You bring him back the next week. Honestly, in a no-win situation, because the guy you book him against also desperately needs to win on the main show, but you put him on Raw against the NXT champion, Karrion Kross, and guess what? Keith Lee is now back and then loses 2 in a row. So already he's defined down to the fans as, well, here we go.
But, and this is just occurring to me, Zelina Vega's return.
Oh, yeah.
There's a parallel there. I mean, Keith Lee wasn't let go like Zelina Vega was, but when you bring her back, she loses. You bring, next time around, she loses again. There's not that.
It's not putting a shirt on her, but it's when you are already in the ring and you don't get a ring entrance or music, that's a pretty bad sign. And that's where Zelina Vega is right now, is that she gets brought back and she's the one standing in the ring when you come back from a commercial break. Keith Lee is close to being that person on the Raw's men division. Now, they did, I will say, in a third week in WWE's bizarre even Steven booking, they did give him a win over Karrion Kross. But again, Karrion Kross needs to be winning too on the main roster. He is the NXT
not losing in
champion.
2 minutes to Jeff Hardy. Love Jeff Hardy, love Karrion Kross, but that's not what you do to the NXT champion.
That very same Raw that Keith Lee came back on is when they did that. So there was 2 really odd booking decisions on Monday Night Raw where you think, who is manning this ship? Who's making these decisions? These men both need to be brought out as big deals.
Maybe it's the same guy who's monitoring the contracts right now.
And no offense to Jeff. Jeff is a legend, but you put Karrion in the ring against R-Truth and let him win.
Right. Or
and no offense to our truth, but I mean, if you just wanting to like protect somebody like a Jeff Hardy, you just don't give Karrion Kross Jeff Hardy. You give him someone lower down on the totem
or
pole.
you give him a heel win. You don't get. I mean, but Karrion Kross,
Clean.
yeah, Karrion Kross should go out there and be a beast. Keith Lee should go out there and be a beast. Keith,
at this point, you do neither man any favors
right,
by putting them both out there, and what to a large, broad pop audience is seeing both of them for the first time.
Sure.
When they both need to be facing guys that they can be beast against and defeat.
That's true.
But that is not what's happened. So, knowing what we know, do you think that they kept Keith Lee on for a reason? Doug, do you think that there is a bigger plan for Keith Lee, or do you think that they just literally did not want to lose him to the competition? They still don't know what to do with him, and that the future isn't any brighter than it was for him
here's the
months
thing.
ago.
I think once upon a time I would have thought that they don't want to lose him to the competition, but they also don't know what to do with him. So they're just keeping him around to make sure that he doesn't end up in somebody else's toy box. However, with everything that they have lost recently or given up or given away or released, however you want to say it, there's a lot of talents out there that are going to go on to be utilized the way us old marks want to see them utilized. And maybe that doesn't fit with the pop music formula that is, I guess, the main roster. Yeah, maybe that's I think that's a great analogy. And maybe that's maybe we're those indie underground guys that want to see, our Keith Lees, but I don't think they know what to do with them, and I don't think there's a lot of direction in WWE right now.
David, I agree with you. A Sheamus type feud for Keith Lee would be good.
Yeah.
I'd be fine for even letting Sheamus go over a time or two if it was by cheating.
Yeah.
Only if it means eventually Keith Lee would prevail, because
Right.
Sheamus is a talent who's been around long enough that winning and losing isn't really going to affect his place on the card. For Keith Lee right now, looking big in front of the mainstream audience is going to affect his place on the card. I honestly don't know that it'll happen, but I think that a rehab, and not a physical rehab, but a just emotional and physical reset, big fish in a small pond. I don't know that a return to NXT wouldn't be the best thing for Keith Lee.
That'd be great.
They know what to do with him. You put him on the brand there with Samoa Joe getting ready to come back. I mean, there's a whole lot that's changed at NXT since Keith Lee was last there. So there's a whole new string of opponents. Keith Lee versus Walter. Who wouldn't want to see that? I mean, you talk about house fights. There's a lot of possibilities, I think, more on the NXT roster. Not that the Raw and SmackDown don't have plenty. It's just I don't see any of those folks fitting with what their plans are for Keith Lee. So I think he's going to get lost. The only plan is don't let him go.
Apparently it is, and I'm not sure. I still not sure I understand that when other talents are being released left and right. Unless he's on like a $25 a week contract or something insane. They're like, we're going to keep him around.
Yeah, and maybe they do have him locked up so cheap, and maybe for an extended period of time that they would rather hold on to him and let his contract run out than to let him show up on Wednesday nights.
Yeah, exactly.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean. His wife is in her division as talented as Keith is in his, and she unfortunately was saddled with that horrible retribution gimmick, and has never recovered from that. So you do have a situation kind of like an Aleister Black and Zelina Vega, where you have a real life couple who are underutilized and unhappy. Both of them were let go. Eventually, Zelina was brought back. But why in the world Mia and Keith survived, it really is a bit of a mystery. So I don't know who they have nude pictures on, but apparently somebody. My hope is that Keith Lee, gets it turned around, because I have no doubt that if they were dumb enough to let him go, he's going to still be a big star in this business.
Absolutely.
It's destined. If it's not with Raw, he's still destined to be a star.
Yeah. I mean, and Keith Lee, Impact, Ring of Honor, New Japan. He could go wherever. Yeah, like most of the talents we've talked about that have been released, he could go under anywhere and be utilized the way at least we think they should be utilized. And probably, if you guys are watching this, a lot of you guys are thinking the exact same way we do.
So yeah, that's the curious case of Keith Lee. We would like to think that his future is brighter here at Raw, but I think, Doug, we're kind of in agreement that Raw is probably not where it's going to be. It's either going to be back in NXT or elsewhere in the broader wrestling world.
Yeah.
But Keith Lee will rise to the top.
We will rise.
He will rise. And so, if you're watching this in the archives, let us know what you think. Big Keith Lee fan, what matchups do you see for him on the main roster? And do you think that things are going to get better, or do you agree with us that even though he's back on TV, it's probably not going to be any different than it was the last time? Let us know what you think.
Let us know what you think of that fantasy booking of Keith Lee and Volta. I want to see that.
I want to see that.
Kevin, we heading towards the big finish?
We are heading towards the big finish. And Doug, because it has been several weeks since we've done a show, and because we are having a show just this Sunday, this big finish is for last week. The last week. These are the matches you need to see. These are the performances you need to see. This is the stuff you also need to not worry about when we go to our botches of the week. And then we'll cover this week's news on Sunday. Botch of the week, Doug.
Botch of the week. I'm not even sure when this happened. We were just talking about it, but let's talk about the way they're treating their returning, or not even their returning. First of all, Keith Lee losing. That's a botch. I'm not sure even when that happened at this point. And what you said, Karrion Kross. I want to rant about this Karrion Kross thing for just a second. I'm not sure if I'm a week or two out at this point because everything's just blurred together.
Get mad.
What the hell? Come on. You do not treat one of your champions like this. You put them with a legend like Jeff Hardy to get them over in front of the main roster audience. You want to introduce, Kurt Cobain to Celine Dion fans? You don't do it like that. And let Celine Dion beat down Kurt Cobain in 2 minutes. You don't do that. That's all I got. There we go.
And I want to see Scarlett by his side too. It's a package deal.
You take his music, you take his wife. Come on.
Yeah. And then they booked themselves in the corner like we just talked about, because after Jeff Hardy, they put him in there against a guy who needed the win just as bad as he did. So that's just poor booking.
It is.
Poor booking. My botch of the week, Doug, I'm afraid I'm going to have to do this to you, but it's not WWE related.
Don't you say AEW.
I'm going to say it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it.
Give me a drink.
Jericho versus Nick Cage. I am all for different styles of wrestling, and I do not begrudge Nick Gage for making a living. But Nick Gage was recently, profiled on Dark Side of the Ring. You can go see for yourself why Nick Gage is such a controversial figure in the world of professional wrestling. He's a deathmatch wrestler. I also understand why AEW wants to set themselves up as different than their competition. Sure. However, there's difference, and then there's playing into the criticism of your competition. It's one thing when your competition derides you as being blood and guts, and you go and name your pay-per-view blood and guts to mock them.
Sure.
But then when you go put Nick Gage on TV and wrestle a death match, you're almost leaning too heavily into the criticism and making them look like, well, maybe they have a point. And I'm not even saying the match was bad. It was good. It was entertaining. I actually really like the trials of Jericho that they're going through right now, the MJF. The whole angle was great. Having him face off against Juventud and bringing all that was great. I just don't know that giving that platform to some a ex-prisoner like Nick Gage, who is as controversial as he is, that having Chris Jericho being sliced open by a pizza cutter while a Domino's pizza commercial airs, which apparently did not make Domino's very happy.
Okay,
It's just not a great look for a I guess, again, if you're punk rock and you're doing a little indie thing and you're playing in the clubs, you can do all that kind of stuff. But when you do have a Domino's corporate sponsor, and it's not you don't have to be family friendly to go to the other extreme and maybe go a little too far for a mainstream audience.
I've got to say that match did introduce me to my new favorite hardcore weapon, because you know this for years, dating back to the 90s, the cookie sheet.
He's a big fan of the
has
cookie
been
sheet.
my favorite, hardcore weapon of choice. That has now been replaced with the pizza cutter, the pizza slicer.
So I think that Doug is obviously in disagreement with me on this.
I don't like those style of matches. I mean, they are entertaining.
It did entertain me.
I mean, I think back to the 90s when I saw my first one, which was like a legit like Foley funk match.
Yeah.
And I was just like, what am I watching? Never.
You can't turn away.
Never in 2021 would I think I would see something like that. Of course, just a few months ago, we saw like a barbed wire death match. But
True. This one was actually more of a real death match than what that was.
This truly was. But I'm not.
Nick Gage don't play.
Yeah, I'm not. I haven't seen that dark side with him yet.
Yeah.
So it sounds like I need to catch up.
You do.
But yeah, I mean, it was entertaining. I found it entertaining, but that's not my. That's
one thing I will give it credit for is, at least kudos to Chris Jericho. If you're going to do it and get in there with a maniac like that, who's legitimately going to carve you up and tell you in advance, yeah, we're going to do this for real. Sure. I mean, that's what Nick said afterwards. Like I told him, hey, none of that fake. You know what?
Right.
And Jericho was fine with it. I mean, Jericho is a pro. He rolled with it, and he wrestled that man's style, and that man carved him to pieces, and with light tubes and everything else. And kudos to Jericho for walking it. Doug, performance of the week. Is it Pizza Cutter?
The Pizza Cutter is my performer of the week. Domino's, please sponsor us. Promise no bloody pizza cutters for here. No, but again, we've been on, we've been off. Yeah, I'm not sure where we are and where this falls, but you mentioned it earlier. Switchblade Jay White, man. Switchblade. My first introduction to Switchblade was not an RH. Nope. Sorry, a New Japan show at the Cow Palace.
Oh, okay.
With he and Juice Robinson going at it.
Yeah.
I realized then this was my first seeing, and Switchblade was still with Chaos then. He was nowhere near Bullet Club at that point. And I was like, this kid, this is something. This guy is going to be a next level heel. Of course, now we have him on Impact, and he's not exactly a heel right now.
No.
But kid's still next level. I love Switchblade Jay White. I love what he is doing on Impact right now. It is just good stuff. Absolutely.
Hey, truly, folks, Impact gets slept on. I really think they don't get credit for that. They've been sneaky good for like the last year and a half. I first Jay White, for me, it was Ring of Honor, and I didn't get it at first. I know that's bad to say, but maybe he more grew into it, because then when I saw him again, which was the very match you mentioned, Magic, and it's been Magic ever since.
Yeah.
Good choice. My performer of the week is someone else who is maybe underexposed to a lot of the mainstream audience, but I want to call out for my performer of the week, Alexander Hammerstone. Hammerstone, easy for me to say. Alexander Hammerstone is the National Open Weight champion and has been for 2 years now in MLW. And MLW does about the best job of almost any promotion of doing the slow burn. It's kind of like NXT UK or New Japan. They'll build something for a long time. For 2 years, he's held this belt. This makes you the automatic number one contender. Think Intercontinental title to world title. It makes you the number one contender for the world championship, which is Jacob Fatu, who has also held his belt for 2 years.
Nice.
This kind of patience is not heard of in modern wrestling. And yet for 2 years, Jacob Fatu has finagled his way around facing Alexander Hammerstone. I can't get the name right. But that is an awful long time to be able to avoid someone by hook or by crook. So MLW returned to the air like a lot of wrestling shows are doing, and they did so with Battle Riot, which is their annual event, it is their version of the Royal Rumble. And much like the Royal Rumble, the winner gets an automatic world title shot. So Alexander Hammerstone, he won the Battle Riot, and therefore Fatu can no longer avoid. So after 2 years of both men holding the top two titles, they're finally going to have the big one-on-one.
Cool.
That's how you build a main event that means something when it happens. It's a little promotion that hardly anyone's even watching, probably, and yet 2 years.
Yes, that is.
It's
unheard of.
I mean, back in the day, but since
back in the day,
late early 90s, probably that was the last time. I mean, late 80s maybe was it, and then ever since then, 5-6 months title reigns are long title reigns now.
Yeah,
So
in the modern era,
modern era.
we've
So
had Punk and then Lesnar holding your belt longer than Punk.
yeah. Yeah, I mean, and back in San Martino used to hold it for like years,
years and years.
So yeah, thanks. Congratulations to Hammerstone and to MLW for showing that kind of patience to have a big payoff for the fans. That's fantastic. Match of the week, Doug. Last week, what did you see that you really liked on AEW?
Man. I love the way you set that up. Yeah. Let's talk about the Elite versus Hangman and the Dark Order. I love the poetry there, the hope spots, the way little Johnny Hungy is so over.
Oh yes, I never thought I'd see it, but yes,
I love all that, and I love the just poetic ending where Hangman is stopped by somebody grabbing a hold of him, just like he screwed the Bucks out of their title. We got to rewind here because we're talking about plenty of time back through there when was it with FTR where Hangman stops the Bucks from finishing that match. Hangman loses because of that. I love the way this has all been set up. I'm not sure where we go now, but clearly, and we can talk about this more on Sunday. Clearly, they're still working this angle because and I said it at the beginning of the year, Hangman takes that belt from Kenny eventually after kicking out of a one-winged angel. I'm not sure when, I'm not sure how, but it happens this year.
Talk about patience and long-term booking that's going to pay off.
Yeah.
Doug, this is going to make you happy. Actually, it's going to make your patron happy as well. But my match of the week is also from AEW. See if it comes. Oh, yep, dang, there we go. Thank you, Tony.
Thanks, Tony.
FTR versus Proud and Powerful last week. So you got two of the best tag teams in the world and actually showcasing tag team wrestling. These are two teams that actually haven't touched a whole lot since even though they're under the same banner, and they promoted it in advance. And so that it meant something when it finally happened. And especially in a week where, I hadn't planned it this way, this was my match of the week anyway, but in a week when we're saying goodbye to Bobby Eaton, seeing what FTR, who's the closest thing that you got to like Tully and Arn and the old Midnight Expresses I think we have out there against a team like Proud and Powerful, repping what tag wrestling can be, seems kind of appropriate. But that's one match that I'd definitely go back and see. Go back and watch last week's Dynamite because both those matches were on that same episode. So give yourself a favor.
And just to add to that match, a quick, I think, unplanned ending. It may have ended the way it was scripted, but I don't think it was ended the way it was intended because we had a member of FTR getting hurt outside the ring and having a quick wrap up there to finish things. But everybody seems to be okay. Thankfully, because FTR, but all four of those guys, excellent performers. You guys know I'm really going to say anything bad about AEW. My God, I've got Cody's shirt on.
That's why I had to put, I even feel bad putting him in my botch of the week, but someone's got to be in that spot. But that is the Two Bros Wrestling Show for tonight, and we appreciate you guys for tuning in on a rare Thursday. Doug, Sunday night, you know what we're talking about?
I don't.
Probably not. Probably not.
Is it a pay-per-view?
It is not pay-per-view Sunday. This is one that you definitely want to catch. I say that every week because we're just that good.
We are that good.
Peacock. 6 months. Peacock. 6 months ago, Peacock became the official home of the WWE Network. At the time, they said, give us until SummerSlam and we will, everything that you're used to, we'll start out slow, we'll build it. How have they done? We will be talking about that. We are going to be giving them our grades and saying what's there, what's not there, what we're happy with, what they fixed, and what they still have to work on. So if you have problems with Peacock or if you're just really happy with Peacock, tune in Sunday and voice your opinions because that's what we're talking about. We're giving them the 6-month review. See if they did what they said they were going to do. Because it's SummerSlam time. So
it is SummerSlam.
Time's up.
Time is up, Peacock. Do better.
Time is up. Time is up for us, Doug.
Good night, everybody. Thanks for watching.